Today's scripture reading is from Psalm chapter 137. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps. For there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not remember and consider Jerusalem my highest joy. Remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on that day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to its foundations. Daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction. Happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us. Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. This is the word of the Lord.
My name is Mark once again. It's great to be back. It was interesting to hear that clearing of the throat. Thanks be to God. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It is a difficult psalm to hear in many ways. It's difficult because of the curses that are poured down on the Edomites and the Babylonians by the psalmist, and here it is in the Bible. It's actually interesting. I actually love this psalm. Not because I hate children. Blessed is the one who dashes your children against the rocks, not because I hate children. For me, it's the personal story of a musician, a lyre player, no less. Also, it gives us some insight into the workings of trauma. This is the song of a musician, an artist, working through the trauma of conquest and exile. It's utterly honest, and it's probably pretty healthy. The psalm's well known for a couple of reasons. One is because it's Boney M, about 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago now, did a version of this, By the Rivers of Babylon, There We Wept. You remember it? I'll give you the melody for those who don't. And so on. You remember it, right? Oh, thank you. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. Boney M didn't write the song. The tune was written by the Melodians, a Jamaican band, a few decades before, a Rastafarian band. The Rastafarians did experience political oppression in Jamaica, and I've learned that the term Babylon among Rastafarians was used for oppressive governments and even the police. So the police could be Babylonians. So it was they used Psalm 137 to express the difficulty that they had in living in Jamaica at the time, which is probably a good use for the psalm, an appropriate use. The Psalm 137, it is what we call, it's an exilic psalm. It was written for people who were exiled to Babylon. It's an exilic psalm because these people had been taken from their land, Syria, Palestine, Israel today, and taken to the Neo-Babylonian Empire into exile. And there they sing this psalm. It's an exilic psalm, and it longs to go home. I suppose the other reason why this psalm is well known is because of the curse against the other nations, which is so strong. Verse 8 and 9. O daughter of Babylon, doomed to destruction, Blessed be the one who repays you for what you've done to us. Blessed shall he be who takes your little ones and dashes them against the rocks. It's a cry of rage. And these things had been done to the singers' community, to the writers' community, and to their families and to their friends. The community had been destroyed. It's important to remember and helpful to remember that the singer didn't have power to do what he was singing. He didn't have the power to live into this curse because he was exiled and powerless politically in Neo-Babylon. But the rage from what had happened to his people moves through these singers, maybe in a healthy way. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do with trauma. Let's explore that. The Psalms are so honest, so personal, so raw. They can become our friends. Even this one. This psalm's actually become important to me as I've processed a traumatic event in my life. And the experience of trauma is written all over this psalm. So I'd like to take a fresh look at this psalm, Psalm 137, and we'll look at it we'll use 3 tools. We'll give it a close reading. Second, a lens of trauma studies, which is kind of a new field and very helpful for the Old Testament. And then third, actually the lived experience of artists, because this is all about the story of a lyre player. Just to say too, the position of this psalm, Psalm 137, is interesting. So you perhaps know that there are 150 psalms, songs in the middle of the Bible, the ancient songbook of the Old Testament. Many of them are grouped together. Psalm 137 kind of stands by itself. It follows the Psalms of Ascents, so they're called, which is Psalm 120 to 134. If you can picture that, Psalm 120 to 134, they're called the Psalm of Ascents because they're the psalms that were sung as people pilgrimaged up the hill to Jerusalem for cultic ritual. And then, so that finishes at Psalm 134. And then this is 137, where we're longing for home. And just to note, Psalm 136 also stands by itself. And that's the psalm that you may know that has every second line says, his love endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever. Give thanks to the God of gods, his love endures forever. His love endures forever about 20 times. His love endures forever. And then the trauma of exile. So the position's significant, pastoral if you like, but also lyrical. Well, let's get stuck into our psalm now and give it this close reading. Just kind of paying attention to trauma, paying attention also to these musicians' experience and to the Spirit as we read. Let's just grab the next slide, the map, if we can, please. Here we are. So it begins, by the rivers of Babylon. I'm not going to sing it because you'd leave the room if I did. I'm not much of a singer. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and there we wept as we remembered Zion. So the ancient people of Judah, the southern kingdom in ancient Israel, they're sitting by a river in the land of their tormentors. Can you see them sitting there by the water, weeping? They're consumed with grief. They're unable to get up, consumed with grief. So here they are by the river, and they're in modern-day Iraq, the Neo-Babylonian Empire. There are these rivers, the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. That's where they are. And they have been exiled from Syria, Palestine, Israel, to the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And the prophets of the Old Testament tell us that they were exiled, destroyed by the Neo-Babylonian Empire for their syncretistic worship, their failure to be loyal to God, and their practices of injustice rather than of justice. Let me grab the next slide real quick. Here is the Neo-Babylonian Empire. So the Ishtar Gate is the entrance to the ancient Babylonian city. And this photograph of this line I actually took at the University of Chicago with my own phone. And these lines, about 20 of them, the lions lined the street that went into the capital of Neo-Babylon. And it was royal propaganda, striking fear in the hearts of conquered kings, showing the unprecedented wealth and military power, the power to destroy of the Neo-Babylonian king. Just let me grab that next slide if you can. This is a relief etched in stone. I think I took this one too, I can't remember, maybe not. But it's of actually torture of subjugated peoples. The Neo-Babylonian Empire were brutal. So we could grab the next slide now. When the Neo-Babylonian Empire in 586 BC conquered Judah, the southern nation of ancient Israel, God's people, thousands and thousands were just slaughtered. Thousands were taken into exile, like these musicians. And then thousands more died of plagues and starvation. Archaeologists estimate that the population of ancient Judah was literally decimated to 10% of its pre-conquest levels. Incredible. So genocide. And here they are, some of these survivors, sitting by a river, and they weep as they remember Jerusalem, their joy there, their community, their place. And then they have a memory, right? Flashes of memory of devastation, the suffering, the unspeakable loss. How can they face it? So they sit there weeping, the intense, unbearable grief moving through them, there by the river, crying rivers of tears. Cry me a river. So if this psalm is for anyone today, and it is, it's for those who are suffering today from forced displacement, from genocide. I don't mean so that they can enact vengeance, but that this could be their song. Ironically today, it could be sung by Palestinian people of Gaza, whose life in their land, this land, has become unlivable. Certainly of people in Sudan as well. So on this slide here I have before you, I have highlighted in red, just going back, thank you, I've highlighted in red the theme of place. This psalm's actually all about place. The place that they've come from and the place that they've been transplanted to. And so you can see here on this slide, by the waters of Babylon, we remembered Zion. On the willows, there in Babylon, there, for there in Babylon, our captors. Sing us one of the songs of Zion, another word for Jerusalem. Foreign land, O Jerusalem, if I do not remember you, Jerusalem. There's Edomites, then the day of Jerusalem, which is the day of destruction. So place is everything, longing for home, here in the place of their exile. Let's continue through the text now and come to the story of this musician and his instrument. Let's go to the next slide. So here they are by the river. On the willows there, we hung up our lyres. For there our captors asked us for songs, and our tormentors asked us for mirth, like a joyful show, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. Sing us one of your songs. But how could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? So here is the situation. The Babylonian administrators with the power are saying to these musicians, who have a reputation for being great musicians apparently, sing us some of your songs. But not just sing, do a dance, do a whole ritual, do that celebration thing that you do. We know about it. We want you to celebrate in front of us. So the Babylonians, they want them to perform, not just to play music, but the Hebrew word is samach, a joyful ritual, a joyful celebration. Show us some of your cultic performances. And some of these Neo-Babylonians, maybe they were kind of cultural studies people. Maybe they had a genuine interest in the culture of this strange Israelite kind of culture. You know, maybe they were interested in their music. Maybe they were interested in their dancing. I don't know. But it was certainly an act of domination. They've taken people away from their land. That's strategic disorientation. And now they want to take more. Can you imagine the indignity of performing your religious song from home here for your captors? It would certainly be ongoing traumatizing. And to sing a song about our God, for all the Babylonians can see, Yahweh, ancient Israel's God, has been too weak to resist them. And you can see in this text the repeated word song, sings, song, sings, song. 5 times, song, sing, song, sing, song. It's nauseating. This repeated song and sing seems to be deliberate for the writer. It's nauseating, it's traumatizing. So they hang up their lyres on the trees by the river. They take their lyres and they hang them up on the trees at that time so that they don't have to play. It's interesting to think about that. As I've read on this psalm, most scholars of the Old Testament assume that these musicians are hanging up their lyres on the willow tree just temporarily. They're just hanging them up there for a short amount of time, right? The idea is that they're too sad there by the river to play, too much weeping, and as a refusal to gratify their conquerors, they hang them up. As I read other Old Testament scholars, I'm an Old Testament scholar myself, I don't think that's enough. It's not enough to say that they just hung their lyres up on the tree temporarily. I want to ask, did they hang their lyres up as if to store it on the tree for a brief time? Or did they walk away from their instrument altogether? I think that what's happening here is like a ritual act of literally stepping away from their instrument forever. A bit like in the English language saying, like a cowboy hangs up his guns. Remember that from the cowboy movies? They would hang up their guns, which means they're not going to be a sharpshooter anymore. He's hanging up his guns. Or a boxer hangs up his gloves. He's retiring from boxing. I think it's that kind of thing. It's a ritual act of stepping back from his instrument. He's walking away from it, leaving it on the tree for someone else to collect. The reason why I think that is in verse 3 there, the word for there our captors asked us for songs. He's walking away from his instrument because he's being asked to play. And the only way he can avoid playing for his captors is to leave his instrument altogether. So here's this professional musician, definitely a professional cultic musician who'd been working in Jerusalem, who wrote this psalm. And it's refusal, it's resistance. He walks away from his instrument and then he says to his captors, I'm sorry, my lyre, did you say? No, I don't have one of those. I can't play for you. The lyre is interesting. The Hebrew word is kanor, and it's a bit like a guitar today. Like, is it Kira? Your guitar. This would have been a portable instrument that you could have stood up in front of the people of God and played and led people in worship. A different kind of instrument would be a harp. There were harps too that sat there. You had to sit down. They weren't portable like the kanor or a guitar was. You can see there on the screen it has a sound box, just like a guitar does today. That's where the resonance comes from. That's where the volume comes from. And you can see that there's this other bar that holds the strings, supported by 2 sticks. It's probably like in the middle of the piano kind of sound, this kind of register. It wouldn't have been high, wouldn't have been low. It would have been the kanor would have sounded around there. And it could have played chords, definitely, like a guitar, and probably played melodies as well. And I know that from scholars who have studied the kanor. I find that interesting. And then an interesting question that I was throwing around with another scholar is, where did this instrument come from? Was it a Babylonian kanor, Babylonian guitar, or was it a kanor brought from ancient Israel? And I think given the poignance of this person walking away from his instrument, the emotional impact of that in the song itself, I'm sure this is an instrument that had been carried into exile from Jerusalem. He probably carried this all the way from Jerusalem. It would have been his most cherished possession. And he carried it from home all the way into exile. It's a huge deal. Here he is in Neo-Babylonia. They don't make them like that here. For a professional musician, it's a huge deal to lose your instrument at any time. You know, I own a keyboard, and I never lend my keyboard out because other people just wouldn't treat it with the seriousness that I do. I cherish my keyboard that's worth about $6,000. But man, you own a cello like my brother-in-law worth about $15,000. You cherish it. But this man has traveled from home with this instrument. This is a sacred instrument from home, made with wood from home, by an artisan from home, carried from home. It smells like home, sounds like home. So why? Why hang it up? Well, it is this refusal, this resistance. This musician's taking agency in a time of ongoing traumatic events. It's as much as saying, you've taken my land, you've taken my people. You have. Well, you're not taking my soul. He's in a sense refusing to live in the past, that past of victimhood and death. And I guess his reaction's also emotionally driven, preserving dignity, disgust at the thought of playing for his captors. I'm not going to play, he's saying. I'm going to walk away from my instrument and I'm going to rage. This is a time for raging. I'm not playing at this time in my life. And just to say, I can actually relate to that as a musician. And maybe in your own life, somehow you can relate to it too. As I said, this psalm has been significant for me in my life journey around one traumatic event. And I was hurt. I had a traumatic response from being hurt in a place where I actually did play a lot of music. I played a lot of piano and contributed my heart, that joy of music. And then when I was harmed, I decided on that day, I'm never going to play here again. And that for me was really important decision. And I thought, I'm not going to play here. I'm going to save my music for places that bless. I'm going to save my music for places that bring healing and joy, not for places that harm. I'm going to use my music to work for something better. So I can really connect with this musician's journey here. And maybe somehow, even if you're not a musician, you can connect with it too. I wonder how. Here's the interesting thing, right? He walks away from his instrument. He walks away from this instrument he's carried from home, and he leaves it behind, never to see it again. And yet, this is a song that's being sung. So the act of walking away from the instrument isn't the end of the music. It's not the end of his connection with music. He's written a psalm, for heaven's sake. He's still playing, but not for now. The music's still in him. Maybe he won't play the kinnor again. I don't know. But the music somehow lives on in his people and in him. Isn't it a fascinating psalm? Well, let's continue and see what happens next for this psalmist. Verse 8. This song takes a turn. The new theme is remembering and forgetting. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget. Let my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. So if you can see here in the words, he's referring to the two ways he plays music. He says, let my right hand forget. He's saying, if I forget Jerusalem, may I forget how to play. So he plays the kinnor. And then he also sings, right? He says, let my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth if I don't remember you. May I not be able to play, may I not be able to sing. Musicians today call that doubling. He both plays and sings, like Kira did today. He plays and sings, he doubles. I'm not going to sing for you again so that you don't leave the building. So he says, may I not play the piano, the kinnor, the guitar, and may I not sing if I don't remember Jerusalem. So his hand and his mouth, playing and singing. doubling. You know, everyone knows the passion of an artist for their craft. And this is like a curse upon himself. He's saying, may I never play again if I forget Jerusalem. And interestingly, this line shows that he kind of expects to play again, or at least he maintains the ability to play, because he's not going to forget Jerusalem. In the same way, he's not going to stop being a musician. And then he says, may I not even be able to sing. Let the tongue stick to the roof of my mouth. Let me grab the next slide here. So check this out. So this comes to our second key theme here in this psalm of remembering and forgetting. And you probably know, if you know anything about trauma, that our processing of traumatic events has everything to do with remembering and forgetting, memory. So by the waters of Babylon, we sat down and wept when we remembered. I've put remembering in green. Sing us one of the songs of Zion, you'd have to remember the song. Verse 5, if I forget you, O Jerusalem. Verse 6, let my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth if I don't remember you. And then asking God to remember. Remember against the Edomites. Remember against the Edomites. Memory, remembering and forgetting. I'm sure some of you know very personally that traumatic events are even harder to remember than some other events. We know that trauma can produce fragmented, scattered memories. And it's a result of a freeze response, disorientation, and an inability to remember. But the psalmist, who no doubt is experiencing some of that, he refuses to forget. He's fighting to remember. He's clinging to a larger truth. And he speaks about his tongue sticking to his mouth, which is an embodied experience, right? Trauma's in the body. That dry mouth symptom of anxiety, it's a traumatic response. We all know that dry mouth symptom. You ask to read the Bible up in front of church, you get a dry mouth. You know, we've all had that as kids, having to present in front of the class, you get a dry mouth. But, you know, it's a fight and flight symptom, but it's also a symptom of trauma. So you can picture this musician, right? His tormentors demanding that he sings for them. And he's singing with a terrified dry mouth, right? It's interesting. It's a really embodied psalm. I'm just going to share you something here, a quick aside, that I think is interesting about this psalm. See if you understand it. As I try to explain it to people, it's really hard to explain, but you'd think that by deliberately remembering Jerusalem, right, by deliberately remembering Jerusalem, recalling Jerusalem, he'd get a dry mouth response because of the trauma, right? So to avoid the trauma response, he'd block out the memory of Jerusalem, right? That's what we do. I'm not going to think about it. But he refuses to forget. He throws himself into the remembrance, embracing the embodied dry mouth response. He's as much as saying, I notice that my tongue sticks to my mouth whenever I remember Jerusalem. Well, let it happen. He's kind of rushing toward the symptoms, wishing the symptoms on as he insists on remembering. It's embodied, it's real. It's like one of my friends, an Old Testament scholar, Peter Altman, said, he's traded the craft of music making for the craft of remembering. So now let's come to the difficult verses, the imprecation, the curse against the Edomites and the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Let's grab that next slide there. Okay, good luck with this. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites. Remember, God, against the Edomites. You do your remembering now. The day of Jerusalem, that's when we were destroyed. How they said, lay it bare, down to its foundations. So this is the Edomites, ancient Israel's neighbors. And the prophet Obadiah wrote his whole book about Edom. Obadiah's in our Old Testament. They not only failed to act in the destruction of Jerusalem, but they joined the Neo-Babylonians in the looting afterwards. And then he curses the Babylonians next. He says, O daughter of Babylon, doomed to destruction, blessed shall he be who repays you with what you have done for us. To us. Blessed shall he be who takes your little ones and dashes them against the rocks. Well, how do we understand this? Verse 9 may be a flashback. The people from ancient Judah probably suffered this very fate described in verse 9 at the hands of the Babylonians. This happened to them, or they saw it happen to their closest relatives. We know this is the kind of thing the Neo-Babylonians did. It was a terrible feature of ancient Near Eastern warfare. How do we understand it being in our Bible, right? Well, there's a lot we could say. Let me offer 3 thoughts. Number 1, as I said at the very beginning, these singers, these exiles, were powerless to do this curse. They were powerless to enact any kind of vengeance against the Neo-Babylonians, their captors, and they were a long, long way from Edom, believe me. Edom was back next to ancient Israel. So these are words. They're working through their trauma, but it's not a possibility. Then I think the second thing to say, having said that, is this, that if you've had a similar life to me, which is, I've lived in Western countries, Canada and Australia. I'm a dual citizen of those countries. I think it's easy to read this psalm with a Western bias, which is a little sanitized. So I do find it helpful to read non-Western scholars who study these psalms and write differently. For example, there's an amazing book by Jose Miranda called Marks in the Bible. And he was a union worker in Mexico defending oppressed union workers. And in his book, he speaks about these texts like crying out for God to judge or the great day of the Lord. He says these texts are so treasured by oppressed people. Oppressed people are with the saints under the altar in the book of Revelation, crying out, "How long, O Lord?" That great day that the prophet spoke about when God would return and establish his shalom, his deep peace. Miranda says, the great day of the Lord has this sense of, at last, finally, this is what we need, this is what we've been waiting for. So I think that intercultural lens is really important for understanding these texts, if you've had a culturally kind of sanitized life like me. But then third, I think very significantly, trauma studies really helps me understand this complex text. So this is the worst thing you could ever say. Blessed is he who dashes your kids against the rocks. This is the worst thing you could ever say. But they needed to say the worst thing. They needed to say the worst thing to let the rage move through them. It's like a true reckoning of the rage inside. So through that lens of trauma, this is movement. It isn't freezing. He's not going to play music, but he isn't freezing. This is a time for intense fury. And he will only heal if he lets the emotions move through him. The opposite of feeling fury is disassociation, and he won't heal if he disassociates. So it's a trauma response. Psychologists would put it this way. It's a revenge fantasy. It's a fantasy for revenge, a desire for recompense. And you know, if you have been through a traumatic event, you'll know this revenge fantasy, perhaps, which it can be a part of a trauma response. And we can be ashamed of that trauma response, of wanting recompense. But it's strangely dignified here in Psalm 137. Where is God in this psalm? Like literally, in terms of where God appears in the words, he appears in the revenge fantasy. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites. That's the only place where the psalm uses God's name. Only here. So it's really honest. It's really human, and yet a spirit-inspired text. I mean, definitely God's all through the psalm, right? Definitely God is here in the whole experience. It's a sacred song. It's here in Scripture, and yet the song is very honest. So by allowing the rage to flow through him, he isn't stuck in the traumatic event. There's movement. He sees life beyond the rage, a country beyond the fury. After all, we are singing this psalm His right hand can still play the kinnor, even if he doesn't have the instrument. Christian hope says there's life beyond the rage. Christian hope ultimately says that we can be free to love our enemies because God has the world in God's hands. And judgment is mine, declares the Lord. Romans 12. So we can be free of the need to get revenge. But the psalmist is not there yet. Right now, he's raging. Isn't it great that the psalmist wrote in the middle of his processing, not the end? Isn't it great that this psalm, in the middle of his processing, is in the Bible? Because we're often in the middle of our processing. And the Bible's for us. What does he desire? Simply, he wants to play his instrument again. He wants to samach again, to celebrate again, to rejoice again. He wants to hear children play again, all children. And he wants to laugh again. And he wants peace. Just leave us alone. Just leave us alone. Well, how do we go home, having looked at this very intense psalm? For our personal trauma and the collective trauma of many people, there's wisdom from Scripture here, right? There's dignity from Scripture. Psalm 137 saying to us, God is with us in our darkest dark. God is with us when we have no awareness of Him. God's only mentioned once in the psalm. Our song can still be sacred even when we forget to use God's name or can't use God's name. This psalm sanctifies our strongest words, even as we allow that trauma to move through us. It dignifies our process of moving through trauma, encouraging us to let our feelings to flow through us. And the psalm is all about bodies in positive ways and shocking ways. The psalmist's right hand, his tongue, the bodies of children, a body that refuses to play. The psalmist seems to follow the cues of his own body, which psychologists tell us is important as we process traumatic events. So I have questions for the psalmist. I wonder if you do too. I do have questions of the psalmist. Having studied this psalm really closely, here are two of my questions, of many. One question is, what kind of bodily sensation did you have when you sang the name of God? And another question I have, are you avoiding singing for the Babylonians so that the Lord's songs and the Lord's name are less associated with trauma for you? You know, maybe for some of us, Psalm 137 can guide us to know God through our bodies as a path for restoration and to wholeness. And for myself as a musician, the psalm inspires me to play music and to play it well, to develop my right hand and my left hand, not to forget, and to play for the life of the world. It inspires me to samach, to celebrate with music, to gatherings in the presence of the Spirit. We happen to have a live dance soul night in our backyard tonight that my soul band's playing for. And it inspires me to create music so that we can dance together on injustice, so that we can create inclusive, joyful, healing communities and events, and to invite ourselves and others into a tender way, that tender way of Jesus that doesn't produce harm, but healing. I've spoken for a long time. I'm going to stop speaking and play now. I won't play for too long, Sam. But I feel like if I play, psychologists, neuroscience tells us that music integrates. Stuff goes on in our brain when we encounter music and it integrates. So I think if I just play for a minute or two, I just receive this music as a gift, even as you receive the psalm as a gift. I just invite you to listening prayer and allow the Spirit to meet you in this word, the word of the text, the word of the music, and the story of your life.